and I wondered why I wasn't feeling any better. 36 to 38. So I thought, great, now we know what's wrong with me and I'm being treated, I should spring into shape in no time. I was bridesmaids at my best friend's wedding. By the end of that day, my hands and legs were on fire. I kept complaining to my GP. Sadly, the amazing GP had suddenly left the service. Maybe he wanted to make people too healthy or something, you know. I'd been told for several years now that I had arthritis, like general wear and tear osteoarthritis. Not once was I ever tested for rheumatoid factor. I always felt it a bit weird that from a young age they said I had arthritis, as in the ageing type. My right hand was no better than before the carpal tunnel surgery, and by the Christmas of 2013 I was in agony all the time. My car broke down, my family and friends just thought I was crazy or on drugs. No matter how much I cried, I was in pain. They just didn't believe me, and I guess I do understand why. But it didn't help. I was getting in trouble with the school because I kept being late to get the kids to school. I'd go for a few bits of shopping and cry and trembling wreck by the time I'd get to the till. At some point in this time I was stuck in town and my right ankle had been swelling up for a few days. Like obvious swelling, like 3 times the size of my normal ankle, you know. You would have thought it was a broken bone or something. It was that swollen. I hadn't tripped or fallen or done anything. It was just swelling up every time I was on it. My left ankle had started the day before, and whilst in town I felt that force take out my right knee, and as I struggled with what to do, I knew I couldn't go on. My doctor's was just across the road from the town centre, so I called and begged someone to see me immediately. And it took me 20 minutes just to drag myself across the road and into the doctor's surgery unaided. I was crying and wrecked. The duty doctor took one look at the swelling and said, "Oh my dear God." She sat me down and felt my knee, and it was red hot swollen, and I cried out and a swear word really loud. I was like, ah! Like, I nearly kicked her, and then I burst into tears apologising for swearing at her. She was so gracious and understanding. I honestly needed so badly at that point for someone to take me seriously. She put through an urgent referral to rheumatology without any fuss. I had the issue that I couldn't take anti-inflammatories, which of course would be the first line of treatment with such extreme swelling. My appointment was rushed through as an extreme case, but in the 2 weeks it took to see a specialist, my other knee, my left hip, both shoulders, my hands were terrible with no strength and constantly locking into trigger fingers. Even my neck and jaw were swollen and stiff. It was honestly like my body hulked out. It was so fast and so debilitating. I've given birth 4 times with no pain relief and would rather go through that every day of my life than the extreme pain my new diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis would bring to my life. Every day got more painful. I always felt I had a very high pain threshold. I mean, I was a self-harmer and a bit weird really. I kind of liked pain, like tattoos and that, but this pain was extreme. It had me crawling on the floor, sobbing and begging for help. Ugh. I can't even think back to how dark and awful life was at this point. I felt so alone and more in need of support than ever. Finally, when I saw rheumatology and they took more tests, clinically I was textbook rheumatoid arthritis, but my original test for something called rheumatoid factor had come back negative. I still got diagnosed and was hopeful that this would mean I wouldn't get it so bad. For me, I was wrong. But I was anti-CCP positive, which you only get tested for once the rheumatology department asks for it. It also means that it's more likely to become the worst form of the disease, with extra-articular manifestations being more prevalent in anti-CCP positive patients. I began on treatment, steroids, hydroxychloroquine, and sent for lung function tests before starting methotrexate. That's the main drug used in UK to control RA. I started the drug in the June, by which time I was regularly using sticks to walk and struggling badly with driving. I had promised to support a friend through a court case which included driving all the witnesses to the city court. By the end of that day I was in tears. My knee just couldn't handle it anymore. At this point, once I had an official diagnosis, I finally got awarded disability benefits and took my kids away for a week in a caravan. I also at that point took on fostering Declan's new girlfriend, who had gone through a family trauma. She needed help. It wasn't ideal for me with being as ill as I was, but I'd done it because obviously that's what I felt I should have to do. And at this point, I also, like my mum and that, started believing me a bit more because I had an official diagnosis, and the school, like, I'd been running late for the school and getting in trouble with them. They finally had, once they had the official diagnosis, I started getting a little bit more understanding and respect for what was going on in my life. So I took them all on holiday, for a week in a caravan with my disability benefits once it had come through. I'm really glad that I did that. A lot of people said I shouldn't waste that much money on going on a holiday with the kids, but we've never had a holiday and we're never likely to go on holiday again. So I'm really glad that we did that. Since starting the methotrexate, I'd been increased to the maximum dose and switched from oral to injections. I had to keep stopping the methotrexate as I was getting repeated infections and taking antibiotics. The holiday was pretty much the last time I left the house socially. I only ever go to medical appointments now, and I only manage those because my mum helps me. By the October, the chest infections were out of control. Nothing was working, and eventually I went into respiratory crisis and was admitted to hospital. It was determined at this point that I had pneumonia and methotrexate poisoning of the lungs, methotrexate allergy. They also diagnosed me with fibromyalgia while I was in there because obviously with being so ill, everything was completely flared up, and I had muscle pains and nerve pain as well as my joint pain and everything. It's quite complicated when you've got fibro and RA, but you can actually tell the difference between the types of pain and that. And the fibro only really seems to flare up when I'm ill, like with a chest infection or something like that. Or if the RA is flaring up, the fibro come along too. I had a small collapse in I think it was my right lower lobe, with some scarring across that area too. I had to ask the kid's father to keep the children, which was not good for me. I didn't enjoy asking him for help at all. He had a tendency of trying to play mind games with me, and this was, of course, another perfect opportunity. He had them for 4 days, which was the longest he had ever had them, and at the time, his mum was visiting their auntie in New Zealand, and their time with him had become less fun. He didn't cope well with the reality of actually parenting without any support. Fancy that. It was a bit of an experience for him for a little while. Poor soul. Do I sound bitter? He was texting me whilst I was in hospital, declaring he still loved me and was worried. He'd said that many times over the years, especially when I was unstable mentally. He would do it and try and wind me up and stress me out. I didn't have the energy for it all anymore. I knew the doctors were worried. I knew I was really poorly, and I knew I needed to focus on staying alive. Once I was out of the hospital, he came with the obligatory, "Not really, hope you die," kinds of texts. Then a few weeks later he informed me when bringing the kids home from MammaCass that he would not be collecting the children anymore, as he was going travelling for 6 months. For a guy who claims to have a weekly income of £14 so he doesn't have to pay child maintenance, he must have been incredibly thrifty. He must have been watching the guys over at Living on a Dime. So yeah, I couldn't believe it. In all honesty, for me, it was a relief. The stress surrounding his access weekends had been unbearable. Grace was having separation anxiety and didn't want to go to school. She was like having panic attacks, and she was only a young thing, you know. Him going was, as we discovered, the cure for many of our family problems. However, at this point in their lives, they were heading up to senior school and heading fast into puberty. Their mum, a single mum, had just become suddenly and fully disabled. Now, with my lungs damaged and the main drug for treatment of my condition being written off as unusable because I'm allergic to it, Lord only knows what must have been going through Harvey and Grace's heads at this time. But a supportive and able-bodied parent would probably have been a good thing for them. At this point, most people had lost interest in me. There's only so many times people can say get well soon before it gets dull. To be honest, by this time I couldn't get in and out of the bath without the kids having to try and drag me out the bath, whilst I cried like a baby and raged at the unfairness of it all. Yeah, I was in a very dark place. I needed actual physical help and support. At this time I really missed my large extended family. We should never have lost contact. Ultimately, when no one else cares, when you can't trust anyone, you should be able to trust your family. I was getting more and more dependent on my mum, and Declan, my 18-year-old son, who had been here helping me throughout all this, took on the role of my official full-time carer. The poor lad, he hates needles, he hates feet, he hates poop, that all makes him be sick. But I give him full respect for stepping up and having to handle some situations that must have been an awful lot on his young shoulders. He had always been considered difficult to control in a school environment, but he really became sensible and responsible in the time it took for my body to fully change. By this time I was 14 stone and ballooning. The hospital had stopped the methotrexate, the swelling was in every joint, the massive doses of steroids and the complete immobility was awful, and all working together to turn me unrecognisable. I began sulfasalazine and lung meds and was put forward for funding to start embryo biological injections. The kid's dad came back from his 6-month holiday and expected the kids to rush off happy to see him. Not so much. They begged me not to have to go. He really had sealed his own fate with them. It wasn't the first time he had deserted them when they needed him, and it wouldn't be the last. But they didn't want to know anymore. I guess once I got really sick, and the fear of losing me in their minds, they really didn't want to go and hear him slating me all the time. According to them, he was much less interested in entertaining them after his holiday and spent much of his time on his phone. Once they refused to go, he went mental, accusing me of parental alienation. This always frustrates me that he throws that in there at every opportunity, like he will get more support if he plays the hard done by dad. It's simply not true. He felt I'd given too much access to my older kid's dad. He himself had 3 times the access to his kids than I had to mine, to the boys. He was never grateful or helpful in any way. He would purposely be late if I said, like, I have a medical appointment, I need you to pick them up at 2 o'clock rather than like 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock, whatever. I need you to pick him up at a set time because I've got a medical appointment. He would purposely be an hour late so as I couldn't get to it. Well, I did learn to start tricking him and telling him that the appointment was at a different time so as I'd get him to do it when I wanted him to do it by reverse psychology. But it was frustrating when I was, I could have done with the help and support at that point. Hello, Coco. Anyway. So there it was, they didn't want to see him. I fully expected him to... Hello, baby. I fully expected him to turn nasty and drag me through court again. But no, he decided to go travelling again. And on a more permanent basis. Genuinely, the kids felt relieved. And this has left us with a much calmer, stable home environment, even if they are stuck with a disabled single mum. And our cats. I love you, Coco. Hi. Say hi. Hi, YouTube. I love my mummy. Anyway, by June I'd been accepted and trained to begin embryo injections. I had heard so many good things about these new expensive drugs giving people with RA their lives back. I was very excited, optimistic and hopeful. It had now felt a very long time since I'd felt well or lived any kind of normal existence. So far, every step that was meant to make me better had made me either not worked or made me worse. The most activity I could manage was to use the loo. I'd given up smoking cigarettes. I'd tried every naturopathic, homeopathic dietary change and supplements galore, until I found the best things that had helped me. I started using Epsom salts and bath bombs, and I started learning about chemicals and our environment, how to make soap naturally. Being so physically limited, it was incredibly hard for me. I craved to do so much. Even the housework, I would look and want so much to be able, but I just couldn't do anything. Next, we start the embryo injections. Much love, breathe easy, folks.